This is Fintech Insider News. This week, UK FCA deploys new sandbox for AI playtime and cracks down on, quote, finfluencers. Octopus Energy and Enfuce launch an EV fleet card. And Starling launches AI chatbot spending intelligence in UK first. We'll be discussing all of this and more on today's news show, so don't go anywhere.
As a contractor, I don't pay for materials I don't use. So why would I pay for stuff I don't need in my mobile plan? That's why the new MyBiz plan from Verizon Business is so perfect. Now I can choose exactly what I want, and I only pay for what I need.
Right now, with MyBiz plan, get our best price, as low as $25 a line. Visit verizon.com/business to get started today.
New lines only. Price per month with 5+ lines. Includes autopay and paper-free billing and promotional discount. Taxes, fees, economic adjustment charge. Applicable add-ons, prices, and terms apply. Guarantee applies to base monthly rate and stated discounts only. Add-on prices additional. Offers in June 30th, 2025.
This episode is brought to you by Tic Tac. Summer tastes like Tic Tac. Tantalize your taste buds this sunny season with citrus adventure and orange. 2 everyday flavors that bring summer in every. Tic Tac Citrus Adventure is a yummy, vibrant medley of lemon, lime, and mandarin. And Tic Tac Orange is the perfect mix of tangy and sweet. Visit us at Tic Tac USA on social to refresh your summer with Tic Tac.
Hello and welcome to Fintech Insider News. My name is Ross Gallagher. I'm head of consulting at 11FS. We hope all of you who attended the European Money 2020 conference in Amsterdam last week have now suitably recovered and that your fintech hangovers have eased. We're here to cure those post-conference blues, bringing you some of the top stories from the world of fintech this week. Joining me to dive into those stories are this week's guests. First up, we have Monica Likama, CEO at Enfuce. Monica, welcome back to the show. I know you've got some exciting news. We'll be hearing a little bit more about what you guys have been up to later on, but we have heard a rumor that you've bought an island, so I feel like we should start there.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And of course, Nordic archipelago and Finn, why wouldn't we have an island? I think for us, it's really a good place to be, as you remember that the Finns are the happiest nation in the world, and islands and saunas, that we also had a real one at Money 2020, is very much part of that happiness.
Wow, I think we could all do with a little bit of that. Well, look forward to hearing more about your exciting news as we go through the show, and thanks again for coming back on to join us. Next up, we have a FinTech Insider debut for Elliot Lopp, co-founder and CEO of Abroadin and BCN Fintech. Elliot, great to have you on the show. Again, thank you for joining us. Maybe you can give our listeners just a little bit of background about yourself and what you do.
Yes, thanks for inviting me, Ross. I really appreciate it being here. To tell you a little bit about myself, so I do 2 things. I have Abroadin, which is my own fintech startup. We're a wealth tech platform, ex-edtech, where we focus on providing financial education and information to help focused right now on people living abroad to make better financial decisions, to piece together the different sides of their financial lives, especially when you live and work in different countries, while bridging also the knowledge gap that exists everywhere in the world between financial services and the consumers who just don't generally have a clue for whatever reason. On the other side, I am the co-founder of BCN Fintech, BCN being the airport code for Barcelona, as we're based here in Barcelona. BCN Fintech is an association dedicated to connecting and promoting the fintech ecosystem here in Barcelona. Most people who have never really been here or have maybe only been here on holiday probably don't realize it, but Barcelona is one of the biggest tech hubs in Europe. It's absolutely a thriving ecosystem, and yet the fintech side of it just isn't really well represented. At least it wasn't a few years ago, before my co-founder and I decided just on a lark to try to put something together, which was literally a meetup in a co-working space. We roped a local founder into letting us interview him on stage, got some beer and pizza, invited whoever wanted to come to show up, and it turned out to be a incredibly successful endeavor. We are one of the fastest growing associations in Europe. We do events all the time. In fact, we have one this evening where we're supporting a local hackathon focused on fintech. After I get out of here, I'm going to go over there to a bar and do some networking. And all that to say is I'm basically a warrior in that I've declared war in my free time, and I'm both winning and losing that, trying to do 2 projects at once.
I was going to say, it does sound like you've got your hands full, but all really exciting things. And again, we're just so grateful for you coming on and sharing your insights on the show. And then last but not least, we have Dimitri Massin, CEO of Gradient Labs. Dimitri, again, look, thank you so much for joining us. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about yourself and what's going on at Gradient Labs.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a pleasure to be here. Gradient Labs. At Gradient Labs, we automate complex customer support use cases for financial services, hence the connection to Fintech, I guess. But before that, I spent 7 years or 8 years at Monzo, leading all things AI and data for the bank. So we essentially automate customer services for fintechs where you have specific regulatory requirements or a particularly high bar on quality where you really can't make mistakes. And we have kind of specialized in that particular sector because that's where our experience and background is. And we can do that particularly well.
That's really cool. And I guess speaking about all things AI and data, I think our lead story is probably one that plays into that. So let's jump in. So this one comes from International Advisor, with the headline, UK FCA deploys new sandbox for AI playtime. So the Financial Conduct Authority, the FCA, has partnered with technology firm NVIDIA to launch a, quote, supercharged sandbox to help firms experiment safely with AI. It will aim to support firms developing AI-powered products, particularly those enhancing fraud detection, scam prevention, and financial inclusion. The sandbox provides realistic synthetic data and a safe environment for testing early-stage technologies. It targets startups, academics, and regulated firms exploring innovative uses of AI. This is part of the UK's broader strategy to become a global leader in AI regulation and financial innovation. In other FCA news this week, they've also announced plans to end its ban on retail investors buying crypto-linked exchange-traded notes, or ETNs, which are debt securities that track an underlying asset but are traded on a stock exchange. On top of this, they've also announced a crackdown on illegal, quote, finfluencers, illegal financial promotions run by rogue social media users. The FCA have certainly been busy this week. Let's take a look at this new digital sandbox feature. So Colin Payne, the head of innovation at the FCA, tells us a little bit more about how excited they were to launch this feature.
It's great to speak to you from the first day of London Tech Week. I was delighted to have a front row to listen to the PM and Jensen this morning. It was so good to see the positive commitment to the future. And as part of this, we were delighted to announce a world-first partnership with NVIDIA to launch the first supercharged sandbox within our AI lab. It's a bold step that puts the UK at the global frontier of safe, responsible AI innovation in financial services. But this isn't about theoretical futures, it's about building real solutions fast. So we combine cutting-edge compute with regulatory insight. We're giving firms the tools to experiment, scale, and stress test AI in a safe environment. We have unique synthetic data sets and extensive APIs, which mean they've got the ability to create products with enterprise capabilities unique to the UK. We're doing this not just to manage risk, but to unlock growth, drive smarter regulation, and create lasting value for consumers and markets. Mobilizing the most powerful fintech ecosystem on the planet, we provide regulatory comfort, and that's what sets us apart. Jensen described this as the UK's Goldilocks moment, and I agree. It's the time to move, and the FCA are leaning in with you. So if you're building with AI, the message is really simple. The door's open. Come and work with us. Thanks so much.
Yeah, Colin does sound excited there, doesn't he? Dimitri, look, I think, given your background in this space, it makes sense to come to you on this one first. I suppose calling it sort of turbocharged, I suppose speaks to a level of ambition as sort of it sets, I suppose, an intention around the government, the regulator, and their intention to sort of embrace AI. I guess, how impactful do you think a sandbox like this can be?
Yeah. I think I'm in two minds. So I think it's very impactful and very positive mostly, but there are some elements that I'm a bit skeptical about. So I think first, I believe it can be very impactful from a kind of regulatory comfort perspective. If I think back, years back, kind of building innovative products at Monzo, in particular in financial crime side, whenever you release something new, you're kind of never sure how will the regulator perceive it, are we doing kind of the right thing here, and will it meet the regulatory bar, even if you kind of go through all the internal compliance and governance and everything. And I think having access to the regulator like this and being able to really closely collaborate on some of those cutting edge solutions, I think would really unlock faster progress. So I do see that very, very positive. But also now from kind of a startup perspective, obviously, like in our startup, we already had experience with the regulator, what compliance and governance means in banks. But if I were a startup trying to develop a fraud solution and have never done or brought any projects through compliance in a bank, I would never know what it's actually about, right? So I think there's a tremendous opportunity for startups as well, just to kind of immerse themselves into that world. And I think that's where a lot of the innovation will come from, in particular in the fraud prevention space. So at that point, I see also hugely impactful from that initiative. What I'm not sure about, sort of this slightly more skeptical point, is what's the role of NVIDIA's GPU is in all of that? Because technically, all companies and banks have access to, I don't know, cloud environments, proprietary models, public models. So it feels to me like every bank I'm talking to, they already have some sort of approved model provider and experimenting with those. So I'm not sure to which degree that will actually unlock additional speed up and pace, but I might be just missing something.
So Dimitri, do you think that, I suppose, the precedent that's being set in this instance by the FCA in saying, we want to work with you on these solutions, we're open to sort of figuring out, how we best help the development, help you get to market, all of that sort of stuff, is actually maybe the more important part of this, that it's going to sort of push for greater innovation in that space.
Absolutely, because I think the technology is ready in many ways. But what I'm hearing in the industry, especially if you talk to sort of larger, more traditional banks, they're still probably 1 to 2 years out from deploying Gen AI to customer-facing use cases. And the reason for that is not that we kind of figured out the security or data protection, probably not. They're just very kind of risk averse. There's a regulation body and there's a new technology, and kind of, is that technology okay to use? Like all of those questions actually where the held up is, right? And that's what takes the most time, and that's why it takes them 1 to 2 years time. But I think regulator being so forward thinking about that is what really speeds up the process. So I do think it's from that angle, it's very impactful, or could be very impactful.
Yeah. And, I think for a long time, we sort of looked at the FCA, I suppose, as the gold standard when it came to how they were quite open and worked with the sort of fintechs in the early days of 2008, 2009, helping them build their products, helping them achieve regulatory compliance, helping them get to market. So I completely can see, that sort of direction, why that would be important. Monica, what was, I suppose, what's your reaction to this story? I think, I don't even think this is the only story in this show that sort of will be talking about AI, but I mean, everybody's talking about AI now.
Yeah, I think also it's really great to see that the UK FCA is showing the way. So I'm hoping that the European FSAs, Supervisory Authority and National Conduct Authority, takes notes, because I do think that this whole sandboxing thing, and I'm assuming that NVIDIA is hosting or enabling somehow the synthetic data and the platform, because in the end of the day, when you are a startup wanting to build something, you don't have actual data that makes any sense. So having that in a regulated sandbox should drive faster innovation, as Dimitri said, because it should be relevant data. Of course, the real world is where the challenges lies, but to be able to train and test things out really sounds interesting. And I have to say, I've never heard anyone from any kind of supervisory authority sound that excited. So I think that's also a good step forward. So looking forward to this actually materializing and actually becoming some level of baseline, and hoping really that the other parts of Europe also learn something from this.
Yeah, I'm with you 100% on that. I guess, Elliot, when we look at some of the areas in particular that the FCA is looking to sort of, target with some of these AI powered solutions, so fraud detection, scam prevention. I think there's lots of data that says that particularly fraud and scams is sort of the highest it's ever been at the moment. I think, we shouldn't assume that the fraudsters, the scammers aren't using AI technology. So I think, I suppose while it is forward thinking from a regulatory body to be approaching it in this way, it seems to me that the downside risk of not getting involved in this way at this time could be quite severe.
No, I agree. If we look at, there's so many different ways you could look at the AI side. And I also think the fact that the FCA is being proactive about it, it maybe is a reaction to the previous big technological disruption where crypto came out and there was this sort of a hands-off approach by regulators. But the difference here is AI is everywhere. It's in the general public. It's in the hands of good people. It's in the hands of bad ones. And you look at, if you follow some of the news from RegTechs, where they're saying, hey, right now it's very easy to clone someone's identity, to create convincing clones of passports and identity docs that our systems can't detect that they're fake. And it's really going to become a cat and mouse game. So to enable the people who are actually able to address this, who are in charge of watching it, the compliance departments, the RegTechs, to be able to use this technology and have the backing of the regulators to do so is going to ultimately help protect consumers. I really do like the fact that the FCA is being proactive on this. Here, I checked, in Spain, it's a very interesting regulatory environment. On the one hand, we are under the umbrella of ESMA and the EU rules. And there's a push to get public opinion on this and to be proactive on it. But it's not as reactive as you'd see out of the FCA in this case. So it's good to see the FCA being the market leader in this front. Even with Brexit, there is still a lot of relationship. There's still a lot of cross-learning going on. So for them to come out and say, hey, well, we can take a very regulatory approach to AI, but thinking about this in a more smart way that protects consumers, I think that's going to be beneficial all around. And there'll be lessons learned from that will benefit consumers in Europe and beyond.
Yeah, and hopefully getting the right type of protections in place, to better protect consumers from the sorts of more sophisticated scams I think that we're increasingly seeing. Monica, I suppose the sandbox was only one part of a very, very busy week for the FCA. Elliot mentioned the lifting of the ban for the crypto ETNs. Again, this to me, when I read it, just kind of says that, that the UK is open for business, right? Was that sort of your reaction as well?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, I don't think Brexit has been one of your better moments, to put it in a nice way. So, I think this is a counter attack, and there's a lot of not that many great stuff also happening on that lovely little island. So I do think that this is a good move also on that side. And anything that regulates in a way that it somehow simplifies and clarifies a playing field is definitely something that I can applaud. And also here I hope that the other regulatory authorities take a bit of inspiration and learning.
Absolutely. I mean, it's so easy just to almost sit back, stay on the back foot with these emerging technologies and not necessarily declare a position, particularly in an industry where, maybe we're historically that little bit more risk averse. But I agree with you 100%. Actually, setting out those standards, providing that clarity to the industry is a much more progressive, and you'd like to think that the upside is there. And then Dimitri, just to close this one out, I think it would be remiss not to touch on the point about finfluencers. And, we saw this sort of coordinated campaign this week to sort of, push back against some of the more questionable posts and promotions that we're seeing in social media as they relate to sort of financial products and instruments. Again, I think it's hard to disagree with the FCA sort of pushing hard on this one, right?
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, not many strong opinions on this, but I think, sorry to tie it back a little bit to the AI story, is that I do believe that now with the new technologies, you have also much better instruments to actually detect such type of behavior, right? Because kind of the good and the bad stuff about social media is that you can't control, but also it's public. It is within the public domain. And I believe we can develop very effective controls to detect whenever such behaviors and trends are happening. I'm not sure whether we actually are doing it right now or whether it's necessarily done from the kind of regulator's perspective or whose role it actually is. But it feels like there are definitely some good controls that one could implement to be able to counter that.
That is a really interesting point, and almost ties a kind of common thread between the three parts of that story, which is quite interesting. But yeah, look, I'm with you. I think anything that can be done to again better protect consumers, I think in this instance can only be labeled as a good thing. So I would say all in a good week for the FCA. All right, okay, I'm going to move us on to our next story. I think we could continue to break that one down probably for the whole show. This one comes from This Is Money with the headline, Starling launches AI chatbot spending intelligence in UK first. So we're sticking with AI. The AI chatbot helps users track and manage their spending by analyzing transaction history, categorizing expenses, and offering insights on how to save money using a real-time chatbot feature. It uses machine learning to deliver personalized financial insights, which can help customers improve their financial habits. Starling's spending intelligence can automatically classify purchases into categories like groceries, entertainment, bills, and more, and will also highlight subscriptions that users may have forgotten about or no longer use. In 2025, Starling reported a drop in pre-tax profits, falling to £223 million from £301 million in the previous year. However, revenue increased to £714 million. It was up 3% from £682 million in the prior year. This indicates that while the bank's profitability declined, its revenue growth continued. Monica, maybe I'll come to you first on this. I sort of read the first part of this story and started to get quite excited, and then started to get into the lower bit about what it will actually do and sort of, flagging forgotten subscriptions. And my excitement sort of dipped a little bit because I feel like we've done things like that, like Snoop and various things. And I kind of thought that maybe the outer limits of ambition for this one might be a little bit further. What's your reaction?
Yeah, when I was a bank CIO back in 2008, we had, then it was called Personal Finance Management Tool. So it's pretty basic. I do hope that it's just the beginning, because I sometimes feel like, just labeling it something with AI, somehow it becomes hyped. But exactly like that was my thinking. I was thinking more like if it's actually helping consumers or cardholders or just bank customers understand better where the money is going and helping them do saving plans or something like that, then it would make sense. But otherwise, it's just it's a bit maybe. Well, hopefully it's a first step in the right direction. But back in the old days, it was called PFM.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is, I think if you removed everything else from the equation and focused purely on the technology, I think what you could do in this sort of like personal financial management space with AI is, potentially huge. But I think what often holds things back is, risk appetite and not wanting to sort of stray into the like guidance versus advice debate. And I think everybody wanting to stay on the safe side of that line. Dimitri, I mean, again, sort of drawing on your experience in the technological side of things, is that something that you would agree with, and you see that as sort of holding things back from the technological perspective?
Yeah, I actually had a very similar thought to Monica, because I think maybe whatever the version it is right now, it might not solve big problems, but if they're actually working on problems like the advice gap in the UK and actually can thread this needle very finely, right? So it can be something very, very impactful. And I hear lots of people currently talking in the industry about those types of use cases, and they clearly have done the first right step. From a technological perspective, I do think it's a very important step for them. And the reason for that is that it typically, like when you deploy something else, and that's the first user-facing application with Gen AI for them, if I understand it correctly. Typically, when you first deploy the very first application, it typically takes you 1 to 2 years to actually even figure out, right? So what is my stance on how do I get it through governance? What is my stance from a compliance perspective? How do I deploy it from a product perspective? And every next product will be significantly easier and faster to deploy for them. So while this might not be the kind of the big breakthrough, I think it's a gimmick. Maybe it's a nice feature, but I do think it lays very important foundations for them for what's to come next. I think that's one, but also I think it's an important kind of perception-wise, right? So they're the first neobank, not Monzo, not Revolut, who kind of picked something important here, user-facing, kind of combine it with a generative AI technology and launch it in a very visible way, which I think can be only good for them and for their brand.
Yeah. I mean, that's a really interesting point because, of course, Monzo and Revolut get so much credit for the speed at which they launch really sort of innovative products. So you're right, from that perspective, it's kind of one up for Starling. Elliot, I'm kind of interested, I suppose, building on what Dimitri was saying and thinking back to the previous story about the FCA and the AI sandbox. I suppose, does this story help to illustrate the importance of that kind of sandbox and an FCA, a regulatory body that is open to working with banks and financial services providers to help, progress their thinking around AI and the use of AI, and as a step away from, I suppose, internal governance and compliance, sort of like throttling the potential of the technology.
Oh, absolutely. And I think a lot of why Starling and other banks are looking at this technology is there's just consumer demand for it. We use generative AI tools in our daily lives, regardless if it's for financial questions or whatever. And people are going to turn to these tools to ask for financial questions. They're going to want to have information about their money and what they're looking at. And banks and other regulated entities will want to respond to this. And obviously how they can do this while staying compliant, while they're making sure that whatever responses are coming out aren't going to cause financial harm to their users is crucial. And the only way that they can go through with this is to work hand in hand with the regulators. So I would be shocked if the FCA isn't actively exploring how they can work with these institutions to ensure that they are rolling out these products slowly by slowly, because ultimately, this is about being responsible towards the customers. You can't just say, hey, here's this wonderful chat tool, ask it any question about your money, and it's going to give you whatever response that you want or that you're looking for. I don't see anyone doing that. I don't see anyone who has any respect towards their customers or their own business to do that. So having this ability for the FCA to come out and work with these entities is going to be crucial to get this technology out safely and to be able to make these changes. Again, Monica, you mentioned earlier that PFMs, personal financial managers, were this first sort of open banking use case. It came out and it fizzled. There hasn't really been a successful standalone PFM company. It's now more of a feature than a standalone product. But this is maybe a way to reinvent this in a way that is more useful to customers. But again, it has to be within these bounds and these guidelines that are compliant with the existing rules and do not cause harm to the customers. So again, this is going to be an approach between the regulated entities and the regulators themselves.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. I think that's spot on because, how useful a PFM feature or product can be as a function of, people not wanting to get too close to that line between advice and guidance. And I think, internally, banks tend to take a very, very risk-averse position on that. And I think it is a really good illustration of how maybe regulation of risk appetite probably is throttling the consumer value proposition from a lot of these features. It's not necessarily a technological problem. It's a regulation and a risk appetite problem. But Monica, one point that I think Elliot raised that's really interesting is, I wonder how much consumers want to see their financial provider sort of outwardly using AI. Is the fact that Starling now has this sort of AI feature and that being public, is that likely to win them customers from Are there banks or are consumers just more interested in the experience, the outcomes, and less concerned about, how that gets enabled in the underlying technology?
Well, often the many people, so to say, is more interested in the outcomes and not how it comes about. And then there's always these payment geeks and weirdos who have a lot of opinions on regulation and stuff like that. So, yeah, I think I learned it the hard way when I was working a long time ago, building one of the biggest retail banks in Finland. And we were sitting in the management team and thinking about what we would think about stuff. And then we realized nobody gives a shit what we think because we're not the end customer anyway. So I think impact and output is what they are in the end interested about, not so much the technology or I would even dare to say not even the GDPR items. And I think we're overly concerned always about these items. I think it's important. And of course, it's important to protect the consumers. But the consumers aren't as concerned about those facts. But that's also why it's our responsibility to make sure that they are protected. So I also think what Elias said and Dimitri said, it's a good starting point. And I really hope that also the FCA collaborates more on these kind of sandboxes so that we can actually get true innovation in these fields, because it is going to change the way we work. Again, I'm old enough, as I actually turn 50 tomorrow, to have lived the internet time, so the .com boom. And it's going to be interesting to see where AI takes us in 1 to 2 years.
Well, look, we are honored that you would spend the day before your birthday, Monica, with us. It's a big one.
Yeah,
it's a big one.
Guys. Yeah, what's wrong with me?
Dimitri, just to close this out, look, I know we sort of said at the top of the story that it has been a difficult year, I guess, for Starling on a couple of different fronts. Do you feel like this is them starting to lay down a marker in terms of like their ambitions going forward and maybe wanting to be a little bit more aggressive in taking on the Monzos, the Revoluts of the world in terms of designing and rolling out innovative new features?
I'm not sure whether that's a marker or whether that will have such a big swing, but I think it's a signal, right? And I think it's also important to see what those companies are producing inside, because I have been on the inside, maybe not recently, but 2 years ago. And there's actually a lot of stuff going on that is not publicly shared, in particular in fraud space, as it should be, obviously. And so I do think it's a small step in the right direction. I'm not sure whether it will kind of fix all the issues. I don't think, I kind of agree with Monica. You need to pay attention to, does it actually solve any big problems? And it doesn't yet. But they might get there.
No, I think it's definitely one that we'll continue to watch closely, I suspect, because it has the potential to be really interesting, I think, as we've all said. All right, on that note, we are just going to take a quick pause here and we will be back with you very shortly.
Whatever the occasion, effortless elegance is right this way. Because Hilton brings you new ways to stay courtesy of the Nomad London. And it doesn't stop at award-winning dining in a space draped in velvet and illuminated by vintage chandeliers. No, this day goes beyond with unparalleled personalized service and attentive hospitality. Oh, and did we mention the Nomad London can be booked using your Hilton Honors points at Hilton.com? Hilton, for this day.
Cybersecurity is the top concern for UK businesses, according to Vanta's recent State of Trust report. But whether you're a startup founder or an experienced security professional, Vanta is here to help. Businesses use Vanta to establish trust by automating compliance needs across over 35 frameworks like ISO 27001 and SOC 2, centralize security workflows, complete security questionnaires up to 5 times faster, and proactively manage vendor risk. Join over 9,000 global companies like Flow Health, Synthesia, and Alica Bank who use Vanta to manage risk and prove security in real time. For a limited time, get $1,000 off Vanta at vanta.com/insider. That's VANTA.com/insider for $1,000 off.
Welcome back to the show. Now, before we get back to the news, we want to tell you about our latest Insights episode. We're joined by guests from Plaid, N26 and Affirm to explore the cracks in the legacy credit system, why it often overlooks millions of financially responsible people simply because they don't fit into outdated molds. And ask, how can technology, AI, and smarter regulation pave the way toward fairer, more accurate assessments of creditworthiness? It's out now. Just head to the podcast right below this one. Okay, now back to the news. And our next story comes from E-Magazine with a headline, Octopus Energy and Enfuce launch Smart EV Fleet Card. Partnership aims to simplify and enhance the charging experience for electric vehicles, or EVs, across the UK. So Enfuce, a leader in issuer processing, has partnered with Octopus Energy's Electroverse, which is a great name. It's Europe's largest EV charging network, to launch the Electroverse Business Payments Card. The card is a dedicated solution aimed at simplifying fleet operations and reducing barriers to EV transition, offering a unified fleet expense solution tailored to the needs of modern EV users. This initiative supports the UK government's wider goals to decarbonise transport and reach net zero emissions by 2050. The partnership also addresses challenges such as charging infrastructure management, billing and payment security, which are key barriers to EV fleet adoption. Monica, I mean, when you read that, it sounds incredibly impressive. I mean, it really is going to the root of some very fundamental problems. So first of all, congratulations. I mean, I'd love to hear, from your own sort of first-hand perspective about this product, how it's going to work, etc.
I don't know if you guys, do you drive electric vehicles yourself?
I'm going to have to put my hands up and say that I don't.
So you're kind of, either you're too poor, Ross, or then you're just part of the problem.
I'm part of the problem.
Probably a combination of both.
I sold my car when I moved to Barcelona, so I don't even have a car. So I guess I've one-upped even
exactly,
the electric
good.
vehicle
So
folks.
then you are actually, the other thing we launched, which was Shuttle in the Netherlands, which is actually transportation, also having this all focusing on really carbon emission reduction. But to put it in a nice way, if you would be driving an electric vehicle, which is a good thing, because especially from UK, also the ambition to go net zero by 2050 is a hard target, and transportation is over 27% of those emissions. But one of the hassles, as I also drive a fully electric car, is that you have like these multiple apps. So in order to charge your car, you always stand there 5 minutes trying to figure out which app to choose. And now as the charging stations are able to also start reading normal EMV transaction cards, we sat down with the Octopus Electroverse gang and how could we enable their customers, their fleet, to actually speed up the transition to EV charging. And as such, having a card, whether it be in the app, tokenized, or a physical one, actually enables that to be much easier. So yeah, I'm really proud of this collaboration, also because just working with the people at Octopus Electroverse has been a really exciting thing, and working with that kind of mindset of changing the game has been interesting. So definitely one proud moment to launch this one.
Yeah. Congratulations. I was going to ask you about the partnership with Octopus. I mean, obviously, they're so sort of progressive in wanting to, move us closer towards that 2050 target. So it feels like a really good partner in that sense.
Definitely.
And can we touch on some of the other, the sort of features, Monica, the infrastructure management, the billing, all of that side of things as well?
Yes, so it's a little bit like what we talked actually with the Starling AI type of thing in that sense, that when you do charge, in order to have this hassle-freeness, you have also the VAT items, the kilowatts, etc. So when you have that in the normal infrastructure, and this is a Visa Fleet 2.0 Rails card, which means that it really ships more of the transaction data that can be then utilized and making billing easier, how much it's been used, how much have the car been charged, etc. So it's going to be an interesting one. It's also adding expense management capabilities for fleet players, and I think that's also making it for B2B use it's even better and easier.
I think that's spot on, because it's not just solving for that sort of payments pain point, but actually all of those ancillary features that sit around it are super, super value add. And I guess, as we sort of said, just solve some really important pain points. So maybe I'll get my electric car, right? It all sounds so much easier now.
It's amazing, and then you can have this awesome car as well. So
yeah, I'm probably not gonna give that money to Elon, but there are other car brands available.
You can do like me, drive a Porsche Macan 4S.
Excellent. All right, I'll take that recommendation. Yeah, look, I mean, like I said, Monica, really exciting. Congratulations. Elliot, what's your reaction to this one?
No, I think it's fantastic. I mean, this is just a great example of fintech going into other industries and to really helping to solve that pain point around making sure that it's frictionless. The biggest issue electric vehicles face is that they're competing against an established system for petrol or combustion-based engines, and some of that is rational, a lot of it's not. But if you can just knock down those barriers, imagined or otherwise, it's going to help to drive the transition over towards electric vehicles. Again, I only drive when I'm going on vacation, or I'm originally from the US, so when I go back there, you have to drive, at least where my family is. Unfortunately, my parents don't have an electric car. They have like a first generation hybrid and a giant pickup truck. It's either or in that house. But no, I think like just the ability to bring people into the mainstream economy, having the technology meet people where they are, is going to be massive. And payments plays a central role in that. And, we could talk all about this. I know you have tons of episodes about this, about how embedding finance can change lives, but this is just another great example of that in practice.
I couldn't agree more. And actually, I think it's easy to understate the potential impact of these types of solutions that knock down those barriers, Elliot, that you mentioned, in actually accelerating us towards those big hard targets, Monica, as you said, like the 2050 emissions target. One of the things as well for me that sort of stands out. So I don't drive an electric vehicle right now, but I kind of think about it, Monica, everything that you said about the different apps, kind of like the way right now as well, we've got that same thing for like different parking apps. Like everywhere you go, you got to have a different app for the park, download it, all that sort of stuff. I guess, Dimitri, that's one of the features that stand out for me, right? Just being able to do it all in one place, and it's an awful lot easier. I think from a convenience and a user experience perspective, that's a pretty standout feature. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I can only agree. I'm one of those people who, if it becomes too difficult to get in touch with the company, I just give up very, very quickly and just try to join something else. So for me, convenience is actually one of the biggest drivers typically whenever I pick something as a provider or as a company to work with. So like with me, I'm bought in. So for sure, even though I don't have a car, I'm afraid the only electric vehicle that I drive is a bus, but not myself, obviously.
But that's a good start. Yeah, public transportation. Yeah, public transportation is awesome.
Exactly. No, I'd always tell people I have a Mercedes with a chauffeur, being the bus itself. But,
exactly. That's a good one.
Pick up real quick.
Monica, I guess it'd be interesting just to get your, I suppose, reflections on maybe where we're at in the UK right now on this journey to sort of 2050 versus, your sort of, I suppose, home space around the Nordics and all of that sort of stuff. How do we compare?
That's a good question. Yeah.
We can probably sum that one up pretty quickly, right?
It's going in the right direction. There's progress, and I think that's the main thing. And I couldn't agree more with Dimitri when you say like it's about convenience, because if you think it's like, again, a recap from a person who used to be a taxi chauffeur when I was younger and during my studies, and then so if you think about being in an electric vehicle when it comes to professional usage, you don't want to be spending any time. So the convenience in a fossil fuel reload or recharge or whatever, fueling up, is much faster. So I think that's why it's good to see the progress in the cars as well, being able to have these high speed charging points. And that's why it's important now for Octopus also to actually have it on a card, so that you don't spend time on figuring out where am I, how I'm going to pay, what is it. And then, of course, when you, in addition to that, get the VAT invoices and etc., I do think that convenience will also then, let's say, push for the fleet providers to make sure that their drivers use electric cars, because it's going to be more convenient also to do the whole bookkeeping, etc. And I think in the end of the day, it is about decarbonization. So I do think that it's interesting, and of course UK is going forward as are many of the European countries, and I hope that that's the most important thing, that we don't sit back and think now that climate change is over, because it isn't. It's a problem that won't go away, and if we close our eyes and ears, it's not going to go away, and the problem is real, and anything that can make it better is good. So continue, guys, to take the bus, and make sure you take a bus that it's electric charge. And then, of course, if you are in the Netherlands, you can actually choose shuttles solution also, to make sure that your employer, or when you're self-employed now or having companies growing, that you issue to your employees this employee benefit cards, where they can then do public transportation, etc.
Public service broadcast. And you know what? It's it is a universally good story in a world of not very many good stories at the minute. So thank you, Monica. All right, I will move us on to our next one. This one comes from FinExtra with a headline: Revolut launches ATMs in Spain. Revolut has partnered with Euro 6000, a network of ATMs across Spain, to provide its users with access to cash withdrawal services. Revolut Premium and Metal users will be able to withdraw cash for free from any of the participating ATMs. Standard users will have a limited number of free withdrawals before incurring a small fee. The launch is part of Revolut's broader strategy to enhance its local services and offer more convenience to Spanish users, with plans to expand the network further. This move is part of Revolut's ongoing expansion into physical infrastructure, as it looks to compete with traditional banks by offering a seamless digital and physical banking experience. Elliot, no prizes for guessing who I'm going to come to first on this one. I guess, what's your reaction to this? And is this something that Spanish consumers are going to be excited about?
Given Revolut's track record of innovation, it's not surprising at all that they're at least testing this. And the whole idea that the company runs startups within the startup and incubates different ideas, this is almost certainly a product of that. And I'm not surprised at all that they're launching this. Here in Spain, so what's very interesting is Revolut seems to see the Spanish market as their European test bed, where they're going to tend to roll out products here in the EU side sooner than they will do it in other markets, even if they have their EU banking license in Lithuania. They have a massive presence here in Spain. One of the first non-Lithuanian IBANs they rolled out in Europe were Spanish-based ones, to try to get more into the economy and help to reduce the issues with IBAN discrimination, which is still quite prevalent here. So in terms of them rolling this out and expanding it, no shocks or no surprises whatsoever.
Is it a reflection around the sort of cash usage still being quite prominent relative to other markets, or is it more just what you're saying about it having historically been that sort of test bed for them?
I think it's more of a test bed. Spain is still a cash-driven economy. There's a lot of transactions that take place in cash. Historically, you look at where Spain has come from economically. When they joined the EU, just about 40 years ago, for the first 25 of that, they had phenomenal growth, something like 300% growth in GDP. And a lot of that was just driven by construction. And then you throw in that this is still a very strong agricultural economy. We have there's farms all over the place. In Spain, and though both of those industries are very cash driven, and there's still an informal economy here. The unemployment rate in Spain right now is around 11.5%, but the real one is lower just because there are people who are still taking cash payments and just not declaring it. Now, the government's trying to bring those people into the system, both with carrots and sticks. But this is in both a combination of a new market that Spain to test this product in that Revolut's very keen on, as well as just addressing a market that's used to using cash. Why they didn't choose Germany for this, where everything in Germany is still in cash, I'm not quite sure. Maybe BaFin didn't want them to do it, but they certainly seem happy here doing that in Spain.
Nice. Dimitri, we talked on a couple of the earlier stories about Monzo and Revolut and Starling and sort of innovative products and features and all of that sort of stuff. I guess people could be forgiven for not necessarily thinking about ATMs and dispensing cash when they think about innovation, but this is an interesting move nonetheless, right?
I do think I was, to be honest, similar to Elliot, quite surprised that they didn't do it in Germany. But I mean, from my vague sort of understanding of how the market looks like, it's actually declining all the time in terms of the percentage of cash. And obviously, maybe Germany and Spain are still using a lot of cash, but all the others is like, it's a dying thing. So I am surprised. And obviously, I don't know what's actually the strategic consideration for those are. My bet would be it's actually not like a money-making machine directly, but more of a user acquisition play where they maybe figured out that the Spanish audience really, really cares about kind of free withdrawals, and they use it as an acquisition machine to acquire large portions of the markets rather than earning the money directly through the ATMs. But it seems like maybe it's just a test, right? So they're testing it as a perk and seeing, does it drive the growth number significantly or not? That's how I would probably see it. But nevertheless, it will be probably quite difficult to scale to other countries, because if they're only like 20% of all the transactions happening through cash or 10, you might just not care about it as much.
Well, I think it's really interesting you mentioned that about sort of customer acquisition. The other thing, because we talk about Revolut using Spain as a test market, Revolut announced last year or in late 2023 that they were going to start offering mortgages in Spain. They were going to go out into what banks really make their money on, and that's lending money. It's not on the transaction fee. It's not the crypto trading, although Revolut is making a lot of money on that. But it's more that they want to get into this market here and be like a real bank. So the fact that they're putting ATMs out here is in a way for them to do two things. It's to make them have more credibility with the local market. They say, oh, well, hey, it's not just this online bank. It's an actual physical bank. Well, or at least they have ATMs, so I can make a connection to it. And then it's an ability to acquire customers. One really cool feature in these ATMs is that you can, if you're not a Revolut customer, you can sign up on the ATM and it will print out a physical card for you there. So for them, they're like, all right, well, this is a great way for us to acquire customers and build out our deposit base so we can make more loans in our strategy to become maybe not a leading mortgage lender, but certainly have an entrance into this market.
Very disappointing, I must say.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, Monica, because obviously the Nordics is known for just essentially being cashless.
No, and it's not even that. Welcome what you just say, grey economy, money laundering, human trafficking. So kudos. For me, it's insane. And I'm really disappointed at whatever entity that is allowing it. Of course, they are regulated under Lithuanian and passported in all of EU. So this is a problem that the Spanish FSA doesn't have governance over this. But again, I've been in the banking for so long and building also ATM networks. So anything when you can lift money into physical mode is when you lose traceability. And what that drives then, as we already have a problem in the Spanish. I understand the fact, of course, that if, for example, all grey economy would be wiped out, short term would be that tomatoes would be left unpicked. But then again, if we think about all these bad things, and it's often not, it's children and women who will be suffering. So for me, I'm disappointed. Am I surprised? No, but disappointed. I don't see any value whatsoever to the Spanish economy. And it's a very costly endeavor also, so I don't really understand the Revolut business case in it. But I do understand that it enables also a lot of bad things.
Interesting you bring that up too, because the government is aware of that. They really do want to get people into the system to avoid this cash economy under the radar. And they just came out with this new rule that if for any cash withdrawal over 3,000 euros, you have to declare it to your bank, who's going to report it onwards towards the tax authorities here. And there's significant fines, something like 150,000 euros for non-compliance.
But they are not regulated. You need to remember again, they are regulated under Lithuanian FSA and passport. So per default, it's a long reach before they get to that level. And I think that's one of the big challenges also with the European FSAs compared, for example, to the UK FCA, is that this whole notion of passporting and collaboration, it's good when everyone plays by the same rules, but then also understanding the fact that every national conduct authority has their own interpretation. And that is one of the reasons that open banking in euros is not as, let's say, awesome as it could be, because everyone is interpreting all the regulation in a little bit different way, which actually prohibits good regulation and governance.
It's still very decentralized.
Yeah, I think the cash problem is such a complex one, and there's no sort of straightforward solution. I think as economies go increasingly cashless, I think it does present this sort of last mile problem around inclusion, because there is just a small percentage of the population that only transact in cash. I think, a lot of that, Monica, is what you're saying around the grey economy. And then part of it is more vulnerable communities who can't access digital financial services for whatever reason. I think it's a really important problem that needs to be addressed. And I think even, I guess it's why central banks are, exploring central bank-backed digital currencies and all of that sort of stuff, because how do you cater for those excluded, those vulnerable communities as we go increasingly digital and all that sort of stuff? But yes,
just as a comment, like if we think about the war in Ukraine and we saw the refugee start to increase and people fleeing, not having access to the money, when you actually put the relief funds on cards, it does many things. But one, it actually protects. When the money is in a digital format and it's not enabled for cash withdrawals, it actually protects the receiver more because of the trafficking item. It lowers the incentive to go and take control of that funds. But what it also does, that a person who are in a really bad situation, it actually is very dehumanizing. Like in many countries, when you get disbursement funds of some sort, you get a paper slip, IOU, and you go somewhere. When you put it into this digital format, it actually humanizes you. So it kind of gives you the dignity already in a bad situation. And what I would hope for in those countries in Europe as well, where we have these challenges with the grey economies because of, let's say, not having the financial inclusion, there I would really hope that the regulators would do more to incentivize. But you said earlier that if you withdraw more than 3,000, you need to report it. And in many places, it's also like if you deposit more than 3,000 a year, you need to report it. But I think it would be really good that we have this payment account directive. So the banks are supposed to onboard European Union citizens easier. But the problem is that the grey economies very seldom are EU citizens. So I think somehow there it would in the end still be in everyone's benefit to get better inbound into the financial digital world. And I think here definitely having some kind of sandboxes or test items in Europe with the regulators would be highly commended, at least from my view, and it would solve a lot of problems.
Tons of benefits for financial inclusion.
Yeah, and less opportunities for exploitation and all that sort of stuff. Absolutely agree. All right. Okay. Now for a quick look at one more newsworthy story this week that we don't have time to cover in full. This one comes from FinExtra with a headline, Irish fintech sector defies global headwinds. Despite global economic headwinds, the Irish fintech sector continues to show strong growth, attracting significant investment and expanding operations. The Irish fintech sector is valued at over 1.5 billion euros and has seen an increase in funding over the past few years, with both domestic and international investors showing strong interest. In the past 12 months, Irish fintech startups have raised over 700 million euros in venture capital funding, demonstrating the sector's appeal to investors. Ireland boasts a highly skilled workforce with over 40,000 people employed in the financial services and technology sectors, many of whom contribute to the growing fintech landscape. Being Irish, I love this story. Good for us. That's all I'm going to say about that one.
Kudos to the Irish tax authorities. That's the reason. It is as simple as that.
Exactly. Good for them. Good for us. I'm still pleased. All right. Now, and finally, a bit of a different topic to end on this week. You've heard of 11FS hitting the headlines before, usually for our work in financial services. But our very own David Brear hit the headlines for something very different to fintech news this week. This headline, quite wonderfully, comes from the Norwich Evening News with a headline, Thousands of bees removed from postbox in Great Plumstead by 11FS's own David Brear. A large swarm of thousands of bees was discovered inside a postbox in Great Plumstead in Norwich. The bees had set up a hive inside the structure, making it unsafe for post-delivery. The postbox was found to be filled with bees when a member of the public attempted to use it and noticed the unusual activity. The Royal Mail then called upon local beekeeper and 11FS CEO David Brear to investigate this strange makeshift hive. Upon being called to the rescue, David managed to rehome the bees in his own hives. We've been laughing about this one all week. This one came from the Norwich Evening News, but I think it also had a little write up in the Times, so it's gone kind of far and wide. I think there was the line in the Times was like, "This former city man is certainly in the honey," or something like that, which I thought was some good creative journalism. I guess does anyone else on the panel have any sort of like unusual stories for hitting the headlines?
Just the island. Hey, why not? Yeah, and apparently on the island we have, because swans mate for life, and apparently there's a male swan that has lost its mate, and it has fallen in love with our Enfuce island sign. But you could give my regards to David, and if he wants to share his bees, they're more than welcome to move on to our island, and let's have some Enfuce honey next up.
That sounds great. We'll just have to keep them away. Does the island have post boxes?
No, but it can be managed. So I do think that could be like a bit old school. It's never too bad.
And I'm just assuming that there's going to be some sort of like Enfuce island warming party that I want to be part of.
Yes, I think I need a couple of more invites to this first, but I'll think about it.
Okay. All right. Elliot, I'm guessing you're in as well for the island warming party.
Definitely. I'd love to come up to Finland. I'm a huge ice hockey fan, and Finland is a massive ice hockey nation. So I'll come up there in the winter even to watch hockey.
Let's add that to the agenda. I don't know, Monica, if the island has an ice hockey team yet, but maybe in the future.
Hey, we can have whatever it takes, but we have the sauna, so we can either take you in it or behind it, and you can ask some of your friends what that different means.
Oh, okay. All right. Dimitri, any interesting hobbies? Have you ever tried beekeeping?
No, but I'm actually very now interested what it means to be behind the sauna. I actually really like going to the sauna. And, I'm literally just going to Google what that means. I'm not sure whether I'm a bit behind my times here.
I think every one of our listeners is going to be Googling that right now as well.
You're welcome.
Thank you. The only Finnish tradition I know about is there's this word where it translates into sit around in your underwear and drink day. It's like
Kalsarikänni. It was also in The Simpsons. So kalsarikänni. So we Finns don't like people by default. And for us, going out of COVID was good because we could go back to the 5-meter distancing. So what we enjoy, we don't enjoy going to a pub, meeting others. We like to get drunk at home in our underwear. Because why not? Because it's like, and then of course we are naked in the sauna, which is also very normal for us Finns.
For Germans as well. So I'm from Germany. So.
I just love that there's an organized day to do that. You know, yeah. I guess it stops you doing it every day.
No.
No, just one day where you really celebrate it.
Exactly.
Excellent. That feels like a really good place to end. Yeah, so that wraps up this week's FinTech Insider News. Thank you so much to today's wonderful guests. Where can people find out a little bit more about you and your companies? Let's start with you, Monica.
Enfuce.com is definitely the easiest way, or then just connect with me on LinkedIn.
Excellent. Thank you, Monica. How about you, Elliot?
Yep. I'm on LinkedIn, probably more than I'm proud to admit, but you can connect with me on LinkedIn, follow my companies there. Well, abroad in there, BC and Fintech. If you're ever in Barcelona, we do events all the time, at least once a month. You want to come down, hang out, just give us a follow, drop me a line. More than glad to welcome you at one of our meetups.
Great, Elliot. Thank you. And how about you, Dimitri?
Yeah, same here. Probably mostly LinkedIn. Well, obviously gradientlabs.ai is a good way, but probably to connect with me, LinkedIn, Dimitri Mason. If you want to chat anything about intelligent automation in financial services, I would love to.
Thank you guys so much. As for me, you can find me at Ross Gallagher on LinkedIn. You can find out more about 11FS at 11fs.com. Thank you so much for listening to today's FinTech Insider. If you like what you heard, please make sure to follow us on your favorite podcast platform of choice. And if you really like what you've heard, why not share the podcast with a colleague or a friend? As always, if you want to join the conversation, find us on social media. Just search for 11FS or FinTech Insider or email podcast at 11fs.com. Thanks again and goodbye.
David and Goliath is a story we know well at 11FS. As a challenger consultancy, we're often going head-to-head with household names that have far bigger headcounts than us. And once again, that was the case at the 2025 British Bank Awards. And the result? We took home Consultancy of the Year for the 5th time. Another win for David. What makes this victory even more special is that it was voted for by our clients, the people and businesses who see the impact of our work firsthand. Because in our world, scale doesn't equal impact. And that's exactly how we outpace giants like Accenture and Capgemini. So if you're looking to partner with an award-winning team of fintech consultants helping to build the next generation of financial services, get in touch. Visit 11fs.com/ventures to find out more. Cybersecurity is the top concern for UK businesses, according to Vanta's recent State of Trust report. But whether you're a startup founder or an experienced security professional, Vanta is here to help. Businesses use Vanta to establish trust by automating compliance needs across over 35 frameworks like ISO 27001 and SOC 2, centralize security workflows, complete security questionnaires up to 5 times faster, and proactively manage vendor risk. Join over 9,000 global companies like Flow Health, Synthesia, and Alica Bank, who use Vanta to manage risk and prove security in real time. For a limited time, get $1,000 off Vanta at vanta.com/insider. That's VANTA.com/insider for $1,000 off.